Hello and welcome to the Anomaly Project, The Agenda, the show where we look ahead to our upcoming episode. Now, joining us this week is going to be Peter Robbins, and with me, as always, is Steve Mera. Now, Steve, you're very familiar with Peter Robbins and his work. I'm sure you're looking forward to this.
Yeah, we go back many years, myself and Peter, and I've been following Peter's work since the days of when he really started getting into the alien abduction phenomenon, working alongside Bud Hopkins. He had an organization, or should I say, referred to as a foundation then, but it was the first of its kind, really. And Bud Hopkins was one of the first people to go out to the media. I mean, he took a giant step, and I have to take my hat off to him for the fact that he was brave enough to even bring this to the table to the media. And it was understandable that he was going to get punches from all different directions about the subject he was covering. But it was only later when his work was solidified through other people's research. Professor John Mack, for an
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
incredible official professor in this subjects and from Harvard, and yet he's talking about this stuff. It solidified, the work that they were doing,
Yeah.
Peters and Bob as well, and it was incredible. So I've been following Peter for a long, long time. We've worked closely together for many years, and it's always a pleasure to talk to him because he's got some years on me, Peter, in this subject, and I always bow my head to these people because I know that going when you start to get 50, 60 years into this subject, I know that they've been through the worst of times, the best of times, and that's incredible that they're still present, still interested, still doing things, having interest in this subject, and still looking for answers. We're all still looking for answers.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you say, Bud Hopkins, I mean, like, as you just said there, he was like talking about alien abductions while people were
Yeah.
really staying away from them and things. But John Mack interests me, though, because, as you said, he's a Harvard guy, but he studied hundreds and hundreds of these things. And he kind of got booted out of Harvard, essentially. Those people really attacked him. It's
Oh, they
also
tried.
interesting that how he passed away. It was a
Yeah,
hit and run drunk driver, but people are suspicious. Some people, and I'm certainly not saying that there is anything to be suspicious about, but some people
no, I
are.
think I think really what happened really and I have made this mistake by being in the US, is when crossing roads, because traffic is on the opposite side, you tend to watch the wrong direction. And apparently that's what happened with John. He stepped out and he's basically looking the wrong direction.
Yeah, because it was
He's
over
looking to
here,
the
wasn't it?
right,
Yeah.
seeing it's clear, steps out, not realizing, and it
I mean, I think the
it
key
catch
thing
you
as well
out.
is the guy was actually drunk behind the wheel as
He
well. You know what
was
I
as
mean?
well, which
So,
doesn't help the situation. And I was absolutely devastated to find that out. Actually, it happened in the UK as well. It was terrible because he was one of the pinnacle people to this subject of alien abduction, for sure. But there was a tight-knit community, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, that there was Bob Dean, and there was
mhm.
Whitley Strieber, and a number of people in this tight-knit community which knew each other. But like I say, those early amounts of research were fascinating, and I know that people have had stabs at Bud and this and that and the other. But then anybody who's been involved in the alien abduction phenomena, people always want to argue, should we do hypnosis? Can it be false
Mhm.
memory involved? Well, yes, sometimes. But then we also got to treat it that they're going through trauma, and we use hypnosis to deal with trauma. So really, it's the same aspect. If it's not PTSD, it might be very similar type stuff like PTSD through these experiences. Not everybody is a love and light experience. Some people have
Mhm.
traumatic experiences, and there's a lot of evidence to support that. But I'm sure Peter will agree with me when I turn around and say these aren't the topics that are discussed in the UAP hearings and
Yeah.
things like that. They stay clearly away. But I do think these things still go on. They might not get reported as much, but I still think people are having these experiences for
Oh,
sure.
there's no doubt. There's no doubt at all. Well, certainly people are still reporting this stuff. I mean, it's just not gone away. And it's like when Peter first started. I know people tend to think that this is a recent phenomenon. I mean, the modern UFO era, but back in the 60s and 70s, UFOs were already ingrained into
Yeah.
the psyche of humanity, certainly in America.
Yes.
Where you had the Roswell incident, you had the 52 Washington D.C. flying saucers. So by that point, there was more than an interest in UFOs within the population. But it'd be interesting to see how he thinks that the perception has changed because even though there was an interest there, most people would still like kind of poke fun at it and say, you're an idiot, you did
They
stuff.
always did.
Nowadays, that's not really the case. So it'd be great
Not
to get
so
your
much, not so much. It's accepted more. And I think we have to thank the fact that, Peter and Bud and numerous other people have been involved in pushing this subject into mainstream and more acceptable.
hmm
Because throughout the 1980s and 1990s, we had things like the Intruders Foundation, for an example, which was
hmm
part of this. And from that came the book Intruders, of course,
hmm
which was wrote, and then even a TV drama 3-part called Intruders, which
Yeah,
was
yeah,
based
yeah, yeah.
on that book and
hmm
based on those incidents where people have quite traumatic experiences. To be honest with you,
hmm
those things do happen to people, and I've seen hypnosis tapes. I've seen people literally go to pieces. That really are reliving the incident, and it was terrible for them, so very frightening for them. And at the same time, I'm not going to brush aside the fact that people do have sometimes spiritual or euphoric experiences or contact type cases. But when we're talking in alien abduction cases, these tend to come out the blue. They
hmm
tend to be stalking their victims, forcefully taking them, well, then, against their will in some cases.
hmm
And it's been very problematic because of the trauma it's involved with these. And it gets into all sorts of things like, the alien implant type phenomena. We
Yeah,
have
yeah,
some researchers like Daryl Sims and others
yeah,
that have worked in that. Jean Lear used to before he passed away. And then the other side is the hybridization program, the
yeah, yeah.
interbreeding theory and all that sort of thing. So it hasn't, just because we don't see much of it, I do still think it happens, but I
Oh,
just don't
no
think it
doubt.
gets reported. People don't want to talk about it now. There was a spate of time when people were coming forward more, but now it's more
Well,
you go inwards and you say, okay, I don't really want to talk about this.
Well, I
It's
think if
kind
you
of
go
matter.
online, there's lots of people who will speak about this. I mean, the news might not, but the news has never talked about alien abduction anyway. They've never mentioned it, and so there's no change there. But when you go into internet forums and chat groups and groups of like-minded people who believe they've been abducted by aliens, these things are still being spoke about.
Yeah.
And these are public forums. Now, okay, you might be hiding behind a name, but the fact of the matter is, and I think you mentioned there about people such as Peter Robbins and Bud Hopkins and John Mack helping to and Whitley Strieber push things into the mainstream. Now, obviously, what's happened, particularly with the Strieber Communion, the movie was made. You had
Yes.
Fire in the Sky. Then you, off the back of that, you had things like X Files. So essentially, it went into the mainstream, and then mainstream culture and entertainment kind of pushed that to the masses. So I think the combination of that, combined with the internet and the fact that people can exchange information and things can be exchanged, and I know you get a lot of bump with that, but that's just you take the rough with the smooth, unfortunately. But I
Yeah.
think all those things have made it a lot easier for people to say, well, hang about, this happened to me, and oh, maybe I did remember that wrong. So, and as far as hypnotic regression, just one thing to say about that. I know some people are skeptical of it, and there's very good reasons to be so. But this, I can't remember the details, but this was used in a court case in America, something to
Yes.
do with a kidnapping, and I believe there was a woman who was involved, not in the kidnapping, but she was like a victim, and she couldn't quite remember. She knew she had some memories there, and it was suggested, why don't we use hypnotic regression? They used it, and they ended up getting a conviction off the back of it and locating where
Yeah.
the people were. So it's actually been
It
used in a
does
court
have
of
its
law.
qualities. I mean,
Yeah.
I know in the UK we ruled as an organization the no hypnosis policy around about 96, 97. But that's only because of that it was ill practiced. It was being conducted by people which weren't really trained in hypnosis,
hmm
hypnotic
hmm
regression. And that by doing that, it promotes false memory syndromes and things coming in, muddying the waters sometimes.
mm
Sometimes you got to consider these memories are buried away,
Oh
probably
yeah.
for a good reason. I mean, if they're taken away, if it's a traumatic experience and it's taken away by these beings, these intelligences, for us not to remember, there might be a good reason not to, because it causes problems to remember. It could create PTSD, it could create sleep problems, all sorts of things. Remembering something which is, traumatic for some people. So maybe that's a good thing that they actually take it away. But
Mm.
however, what happens is people open up that door, they go for hypnosis, it opens the door, they start to remember the things they shouldn't remember,
hmm
and it starts to impact them. Hypnotic regression was designed to actually deal with helping people through trauma, not so much
Yeah.
about memory recall, but how to deal. They knew that there was something that had happened to them and they were suffering, and it was about dealing with the trauma and how to best deal that through hypnosis. But that led into sort of opening up memory recall,
Yeah,
which has
yeah,
been
yeah.
used and very successfully in other cases around the world,
Mm.
especially in crimes and things. So, but when doing that, opens up this barrel of problems. And then you get all these other researchers, David Jacobs, Barbara Lamb, these specialists that are just focusing on alien abduction phenomena. But not just that, it expands into the contact phenomena.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
yeah.
we used to have C1, C2, C3 close encounter, and then this CE4 that came in later
Mm.
as well. What is CE4? Well, it was declassed as the alien abduction phenomena, but however, even that came under question because not everybody is alien abducted against their will. There's those contactee type
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
experiences, so where they
Absolutely.
go in willingly. So it's like, well, Close Encounter of the Third kind of splits into two areas:
Oh, of course.
contactees and
Yeah.
abductees. And people report missing time. Now the fact is that I'm sure there's more people reporting missing time than there is them saying I was being taken abducted or whatever, because maybe they just don't recall it, but they do know they've had missing time. And I was only
Yeah.
talking to a gentleman, Dave Edmonds, who had an experience in Wyoming only about a week or so ago. And I was only talking to him today with the possibility of him having some type of interaction with some type of phenomena whilst he was driving on a lonely road going through Wyoming,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe possibly even missing time. So that's indicative because he is an experiencer anyway, and he's experienced
Mm-hmm.
something indicative to the possibility that something happened. But if you don't go for that hypnosis, you don't tend, you just settle with the fact that, yes, I've got missing time. Yes, maybe something happened. But then people have flashbacks during sleep,
Yeah,
don't they? Of,
absolutely. Yeah.
of things that they can't remember, trauma
Well, this
things.
is this is kind of like it leads me into what I was going to say because you mentioned there about hypnotic regression shouldn't necessarily be used for recovering memories, and then maybe there's a reason that the mind has prevented you remembering that. But I was speaking to a woman, this is years ago now. She was from Sheffield, but she underwent hypnotic regression because she suspected it was actually through Tony Dodd, the
Oh yeah.
researcher. And I spoke to one of his team that hypnotically regressed her, and I was able to speak with her. And she was saying quite the opposite. She was saying that once she revealed what was locked in her mind, and she could remember these episodes more clearly, that she felt a sense of relief. That essentially, instead of thinking, well, what's going on? Am I going mad? What has happened to me? She kind of then knew, and she didn't want to take it any further.
Mm.
She was happy. That's it. I don't want to delve any further. I've answered my questions in my mind, and I feel
Let it
free of
go.
everything.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you know, I mean, she was speaking. I was asking her because I said, do you not think, no, like you said, that you could have been led, and she was saying, no, it's not like that. Saying you're completely in control of your faculties. You can hear everyone around you. You're not asleep. You can hear everything going on. You can hear if somebody coughs. You can hear it. You're aware of what's happening. Similar to being hypnotized on the stage. When you're asked to remember things, you just almost can't help but recall it. And
Yeah.
sometimes you might need a prompt because you might be scared or whatever. But she was saying she was of the opinion anyway that no, there's no leading. It was you are fully aware of everything that's going on around you. So I found it interesting, that there are people who have
Yeah.
different, I do think it's like you said, I do think it's important also to have people conducting these sessions who know what they're doing and not,
Yes,
because
for
then they're
sure.
screwing with people's minds there. So,
Yeah, for sure. Because some people are really, are badly affected through
oh yeah,
trauma,
yeah.
through experience. And yes, it's rewarding. It's also rewarding to have these types of groups where people can talk openly
Mm,
about that.
yeah,
There were
yeah.
none around. I think maybe Bud had and Peter maybe had the first one, really, that
Right.
were really officially put together as some type of foundation for people to be able to share
Mm,
comfortably with other experiences and talk between themselves. I mean, that is a good thing to have to
yeah.
deal with that trauma as well, because these people have got to get on with their lives somehow. Sometimes they are reoccurring issues that they might be going to see these specialists and trying to get advice, but they're still in the program. They're still
Mm,
having experiences. They might have another
yeah.
experience a week later, and there's been a lot of work like that. It's been done over the years where it's been a thing where they've just keep coming back.
Yeah.
Or not just that, but sometimes going on to the children. It's a generational thing that they're
Yeah,
interested
yeah,
in the
yeah.
gene of the family about these experiences. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, that lady I was just talking about, she was the same. She found out that her mother had also experienced, what she didn't speak about it much, but she essentially said, "Look, my mother's experienced the same kind of things that I'm going through." So I don't know if she had children or whether she'd experienced anything that way, but she certainly realized her mother had gone through the same thing that she had. So, and you find that a lot, don't you, with alien abductees, certainly repeat abductees, that members of the same family will also be abducted. Just to mention as well, when you said about you've got abductees and you've got contactees. I mean, yeah, I mean, we'll have to speak to Peter about this because that would suggest that there are different intelligences actually coming here. There's a
It could
case
be.
in the early 80s. I think it's called Albert Bertu, and he
Mm.
was fishing. I think he's down in Aldershot. I think he was fishing. It was night fishing, and he was basically approached by these humanoids. They weren't necessarily grey aliens, but they were alien-like, and they were taken onto his ship. He went with them. There was no nastiness, nothing, no anxiety, aggression involved. And they just said, "Can you stand in this tube?" Which he did bizarrely. And they ended up saying, "No, you're gonna have to go. You're not any use to us. You're too infirm." He was an old man. He was about 83, and they just escorted him back. So that's far from the aggressive,
It does seem so.
frightening grey alien abduction. So and you still
Yeah,
get
but they're
sightings of
not.
the
They don't seem
humanoids
to.
as well.
Don't seem all to be like that. I mean,
No, they
you've
don't.
also got to consider that we could just be dealing with a gender here. In other words,
Yes, of course.
it's like a company of police officers when they meet at the police station in the morning, and these police officers have got this duty to do. They're going to go and do dealing with drugs and crime.
Hmm.
These
Hmm.
aren't. These are going to deal with maybe some domestic stuff. These are just basically, so they've all got different jobs to do,
Hmm.
but some of them could be perceived to be something different than other people, and is what is a bad experience in the mind of the individual. I mean, you could say, okay, well, they don't seem to have emotion. They physically hurt me. They were scary. That's not a nice experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
But for a child being taken to the hospital for the first time and undergoing some tests and stuff would be exactly the same. They
Oh
could be
yeah,
hurt by
yeah,
the
yeah.
doctors. Because how many times you're in hospital, you say, "Oh, just could be a little scratch," and you're going, "Ooh," you know what I mean? They always say these things. But as a child, that's psychologically impacting to
I
them. I'm in a
suppose,
strange environment. I'm going to get hurt. I don't
yeah.
want to be there. I've been taken there forcibly by my mum and dad. I don't know what's going on. It's
Well, I
could be
suppose
that type of
that's the
agenda.
key difference, though, isn't it? Because, like you said there, you take a child to the hospital, even though he'll find it a traumatic experience. If you're explaining what's going to happen, and the doctor's nice, and they give him a sweetie at the end of it all, then it's less so. If you just literally grabbed that kid out of his bed, rushed it in car, didn't say anything to it, thrust it in a room, then that would be
It
extremely, and
is.
that's the same as alien
Yeah.
abductions.
Yeah, it
Some
is like
people
they've got
find themselves like that, but
no
other people are,
emotion.
yeah,
Yeah,
well, some, but others, other abductions or contactees are actually guided onto the ship to have things explained to them what's going to happen and things
there
of that
is
nature. So
difference.
again, it sounds like two different agendas, but two different races. And then when you throw in the tall white humanoids, which I was speaking to a researcher a couple of years ago now, and he was telling me about an encounter in Peru with a tall white humanoid, which made the news, and stuff like this. And this was like straight out of the 1950s,
Yeah,
sort of, that tall blonde hair, white sort of clothing. So these things are still happening
it's
today.
still
And it
happening
does
today.
suggest there are different
Yeah.
sort of races.
Well, there could be, but then it starts to get confusing when you say, look, you know what? Can you describe the beings? Well, these were the greys. And what did they do? Well, they forcefully took me. They hurt me. They did a medical examination. It was all very rough. There was
Mm.
no emotion. And I had to live through that experience. And I don't want that experience again. Talk to somebody else. Oh, well, I've been communicating with them and they're very spiritual and they want me to learn about things. They've even told me about how you fly the crafts and this, that, and the other. What type of beings were they? They're greys. And you're thinking to yourself, well, it's the same lot.
Oh yeah, I'm
What's,
completely with you there, and I'm completely with the fact that there could be grey alien beings, and they interact differently with people. But what really interests me is when you've got because we've got completely different sort of humanoids essentially with completely different. You never hear, for example, an encounter with a tall white humanoid that's aggressive or unfriendly. I just,
You
if you
don't
can find one
know.
on, if anyone can find one online, point it out to me.
Yeah.
I want to know.
No,
I've
you
never
are right.
seen one, so
It, it,
I
it
think,
seems it seems there's a pattern of events for the Greys, for the reptilians, and others,
hmm,
which are not so oftenly, quite rare, which deal with that. And but then you've got the other ones, which are like humanoid looking ones,
yeah,
Nordics, Palladians. You've got these tall whites, and the insectoids tend to be more associated to the greys through medical examinations. It's like the boss
yeah,
one
yeah,
that comes in and it's oversighting these things.
yeah. There is a
And
connection
it
between
does
them.
seem to be like there's a hierarchy sometimes with these. But then there's people who have gone through these experiences, medical examinations, and looked over and seen humans.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
As if there's a few humans over there. They look like doctors and behind this screen. I mean, it happened in the Pascagoula incident. He don't
yeah, yeah.
document it very much, but
Mm.
these strange creatures that had these type claw
Oh
things
yeah,
that
there's
floated down
73. Yeah,
took them, but they did see humanoids behind the screen. And
yeah,
you're
yeah.
thinking, well, is that done purposely to make us think that there's humans there so it settles us down a little bit? Or are they really humans there? Or things
Well,
that look human?
this is what we should get Peter's thoughts on because it brings me nicely into something else we should ask about the hybridization program. Like you said, are there humans there? There quite possibly could be. There could be other abductees, for example. I've
Yeah.
also heard and read reports from abductees who have said that these humans are in military uniforms and
Yes.
have an official nature. So does that suggest there is a military overlap, or like you
They,
say,
are they working together?
well, maybe, or yeah, or like we were just saying there, maybe they're not human at all, but they're
True.
just come across as human. So we'll
Yeah.
have to get Peter's thoughts on that because it's just a minefield once you delve
I
into this
think
sort of
so. I
stuff.
think they can manipulate us so much because there are people that claim to have been abducted by these beings, and they're in a doctor's room, and the doctor's room
Hmm.
looks like their doctor's surgery room.
Right,
Where they
yeah.
go to see the doctor, and they're looking around, but the doctor's not quite right.
Yeah, yeah,
And you
yeah,
and you're
yeah.
kind of thinking, I wonder if they're just trying to make it easier for us, trying to get us to perceive things in a certain way so we don't panic
Hmm.
so much. But it does seem that sometimes we're completely overrun by them, that we cannot move, we're paralyzed, and we just have to sort of go through these experiences. But I do know Peter's done quite a considerable amount of work in that field, amongst others. I mean, I know that he's been heavily involved in Wilhelm Reich's
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah,
weather alteration, clouds buster type stuff as well, which is
yeah, yeah.
absolutely fascinating.
Oh
Really, he's done
yeah,
a lot of these.
I mean, the cloud seeding is. I mean, it was big news. I think in the 2008 Olympics, where China made no secret about using it to clear the weather.
No, they did.
Like you say, I mean, they've been doing this. They've been doing this for decades. It's essentially used to in areas of famine, areas where you need more rain for wheat and stuff like that. And there's also the potential that this could be used as a weapon if you just create downpours on an
Yeah,
enemy's territory. Then they're not going to be able to grow, they're not going to be able to move. So it's very real, and there's a real danger that this stuff could be weaponized. And it makes you wonder if that is why a lot of Wilhelm Reich's technology and notes were kind of essentially hijacked and,
it
and
could
passed
be. It
down.
could be because you could be looking at. I mean, it's what's the first thing we always hear about today? Can it be weaponized?
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah,
Any form of discovery, and under those circumstances, yes. There's rumors that
yeah, yeah, yeah,
HAARP,
yeah.
have been responsible for weather alterations, which could be
Mhm.
on the other side of the planet, bouncing
Oh
off
yeah,
the ionosphere and going back down. It's all speculation, but do you know what? I'm a pretty strong believer in that. If they can do it, they'll do it.
oh yeah,
It
yeah.
just seems to be that's the principle, isn't it, these days?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, you can work the other way, like we just said there about stopping rain, so you can create drought. It would make you think if this is being used commercially, then it would make you think it's also being used potentially militarily because they just wouldn't
Yeah.
ignore it. They just wouldn't say,
No.
"Oh, well, yeah, fair enough, you got there first. Well, not." They will use it. So yeah, we should get his thoughts on that. But one thing I'd like to mention with him on that is the use of, I think Wilhelm Reich quoted things like blue biomes, and he was saying that this is like invisible energy that binds all this stuff together.
Yes.
And when I was reading about that, I was thinking about two other researchers called Christopher Knight and Alan Butler. And they wrote a book called Civilization One. And what they were speaking about in that book is that the natural resonance of Earth is essentially a C sharp, which in ancient times would have been megalithic C. And
Yes.
they were saying that megalithic C or C sharp has a sympathetic frequency with the color blue. So it makes me wonder whether these guys have got to the same kind of determination as Wilhelm
Yeah,
Reich did, in a different way and
in
thinking
a
along
different
different
way.
lines.
Be like orgon, energy, orgon from the blue of the sky. You know, it's
That's exactly what they were saying.
yeah,
Exactly, with the Rayleigh effects and everything like that. So
yeah.
it just makes you wonder, really, how much these things are connected and how much Reich actually knew, because he
You,
was certainly no stranger to the
I
authorities.
think I think his work would have been specifically guarded,
Hmm.
and potentially, could be used for dangerous reasons. It could be used for great reasons,
Oh yeah, yeah,
stopping famine in other countries.
yeah,
Getting rid of the flooding areas in farmlands.
yeah.
But something seems to have. If we did have this technology and it was just as easy now, then why wouldn't we just be employing it across? Let's get rid of the storms. Let's have mediocre weather. Let's have nice weather sometimes.
Well, that's the
You
question,
know,
isn't it?
can we control it to that degree? And is there kickback? Does it cause some problems in the long run,
Absolutely.
causing destabilization of the weather format across planet Earth? Because we have seen change over the years, haven't we,
Oh yeah,
mate?
yeah,
We've
yeah,
seen
yeah,
lots of strange stuff now where we can't guarantee summers in summers. It's just things have changed even in our lifetime, and that's a tiny little piece of time compared to the world,
yeah.
but we are seeing that and definitely change.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there's loads of different theories on that. I mean, obviously we've got time to get into them here, but yeah, you're right. I mean, and I think the interesting thing there is if you are affecting the weather system in one part of the planet, you would think the natural order of things is that you're going to see an effect of it somewhere else on the planet. So you just don't know whether if you're stopping it rain somewhere, that it's not going to cause a flood somewhere else. And I'm not saying that's happening before anyone says I am,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
mean, we don't actually know, and we don't know just. We know about cloud seeding and how that's used,
Well, at least they're being
but
a bit more honest now and
yeah,
telling
but we
us. I
don't
mean,
know what's going on behind closed doors still.
well, no, no.
We
I mean,
don't. So,
I consider if they've told us this much and come out officially to say, okay, yes, this is what we've been doing
yeah.
and this is the reasons why, I already know then that, yeah, there's got to be a lot more that we don't know then,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
a lot more.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, one more thing we're going to have to get his thoughts on, Peter Robbins' thoughts on, and it's hard to avoid it. I know that we both feel it's kind of a bit of a sham, and as does most people, but UFO disclosure. What are his thoughts on that? Where does he see it going? Because it continues to trundle along.
It
I mean,
does.
nothing's actually being released, but it continues to be spoke about.
It
You know,
does. And I think people that have spent the time in the subject as long as Peter have will see through these things,
yeah,
um, and see them for what they are. And will it actually give us any significant gain, especially when you're dealing with a phenomena that doesn't want to give itself up, that doesn't want disclosure. Otherwise,
yeah,
we could have had it by now. But it doesn't seemingly want to. It seems like humanity or areas of humanity want to, but the phenomena doesn't,
yeah,
clearly.
true, man, yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting, and again, something to ask him about. There's the old saying, isn't there, that there'll not be full disclosure because the human race will just go into meltdown. I mean,
It
so
could be.
I know some people think they'll take it in the stride, but
Well, it depends. I think we might be able to disclose certain areas, but it will never be a full disclosure of the
oh
capital D
no,
because there are
no,
so many areas of this phenomena that is just a no-go subject, really, for modern day humanity. The impact, economy and religion and all sorts of things could be terrible. So I think it's a matter of, well, let's just disclose this little bit. You
yeah,
know, we
yeah.
might be on that road, little tiny little disclosures. God knows how long that's going to take, Will, to be honest with you.
No, I think you're right. I think if anything, at best, we'll get something, but it'll just be like an appeasement exercise, basically, just to say, "Oh, there you go," and we don't know anymore. But they'll not reveal everything unless they
Well,
absolutely have to, or it's
public
leaked
demand.
somehow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So we'll still see. But there's going to be plenty for us to speak about, Steve. I'm looking forward to
there
speaking with
is.
him, and it's going to be
Yes, I am myself
great.
as well. It's been a long time since I've managed. We've reached out to each other and say, "Can we arrange a call?" And then Peter's not been able to, or I've not been able to, and it's just
Yeah,
kind of, plus the time differences as well. And I know he's always away lecturing or doing something. So, and he says, "Yes,
absolutely.
we'll catch up when we get back," and then I'm away, and but it'd be really good to see Peter again and get his views down and
Um,
what he thinks about all this. He's a
absolutely.
great guy. I've known him for a long time, and he's very, very knowledgeable about
Oh,
these
for sure.
subjects.
Yeah, well, absolutely for sure. I'm looking forward to it. And Steve, as always, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, my friend. It's been
Thank
absolutely
you.
fantastic. And thank you guys for joining us as always. Make sure you keep a lookout for the episode with Peter Robbins. It'll go out on Friday, the 24th of October at 9 p.m. Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to our channel, and follow us on social media. And make sure you check out the Anomaly Project podcast.com for further news, articles, and information. Until next time, goodbye and take care.